I called it my Gandhi moment because I don't remember a time when there was no Gandhi moment in my life because I was born into a family. My father was a district judge at the time of independence. I was born just after. So Gandhi played a huge role during my growing up years. And we just grew up thinking he's part of our family, part of our lives, because he was spoken about by my parents in a way that was almost intimate. He inspired them. Like I knew him. Like he's going to walk in any minute. So I didn't grow up with any kind of mythology around Gandhi. He was just a figure that existed in a way that was extremely powerful and inspiring, particularly for my parents. And then, of course, came the movie at Regal, which I watched. And I was more interested in the cinematic aspect of it, in the way the movie was constructed around a figure who had by then assumed almost godlike characteristics. And the portrayal of Ben Kingsley and the scale on which Gandhi was filmed showed remarkable respect for for an iconic person by then, who almost every world leader always quoted Gandhi and said, you know, and then came Mother Teresa soon after, and then both of them together. So Gandhiji's life intrigued me. I won't say that I have nothing but undiluted admiration. No, I have very mixed feelings. I think he was a phenomenal tactician, and that's what led to a freedom. He gave us the understanding of the word freedom itself. Till then, freedom was, you know, birds are free and so on. But to think about it as a person who inspired us to think about freedom as a basic human right that we've been denied, and that it was worth fighting for no matter what the cost, and that it was worth fighting for in a way that was not militant, not confrontational. That's why I said he was such an amazing tactician. That non-violence itself came to be a way of life, a philosophy that inspired a lot of people. That wars can be won without violence was a revolutionary thought, and he was the first person who brought that to the world's attention. That you can do it through protests which don't involve pelting people with stones or throwing bombs or using abusive language, and that he could live the life he spoke about, even assuming that all of it was a bit of a pose, you know, the naked fakir and so on, and going to England wearing just a loincloth, was still, in terms of symbolism, it was unbeatable. And symbols speak sometimes louder than words or actions. So the world could never ever get over the power of the presence of the man who could go to the former masters, meet them on an equal ground, equal footing, dress the way he was, and very quietly assert his right to free his people and his country. It was done by then, but the dignity with which he reclaimed all that had been stolen and robbed from us was, for me, the most inspiring thing about it. It takes an extraordinary person to go ahead and pursue a path that he did. And I'm sure there was a lot of personal sacrifice involved, however you look at it. And that he could take millions of people with him along with his way of thinking, his philosophy. That is leadership. To be able to convince so many in a way that that was not militant in any way. A militant leader of a revolution one can understand the charisma of such a person. Throughout history, we've had powerful leaders and swaying nations either through oratory or through muscle power. But with him, it was neither that. His voice was pretty weak. He was not good when he was projecting his thinking uh, to the masses. But I think it was much more than that. He connected emotionally with people, not just intellectually, not just cerebrally. Even people incapable of analyzing what the freedom struggle meant or what the implications of the Dandi March, I mean, the very basic thing, the salt of the earth that we were being taxed for, that he could lead such a march against something that we take so much for granted, salt, was in itself I mean, it makes my hair stand on end that he could think of it, which is why I say that he was so shrewd and he got down to basics in every which sense. It was stripping everything down to the absolute essentials, and to put his life on the line for it, and to get other people also willing to put their life on the line for him and for what he believed in. Extraordinary. I mean, there will be no other Gandhi ever to walk this earth. Like someone else, much wiser than myself, said, there was the Gautam Buddha and then there was Gandhi. So maybe that's a wonderful way to cherish his memory. And no matter what the political situation may be right now, all the attempts to take him off our notes or eliminate him from public memory slowly but surely. So the next two generations will maybe think of him as some vague, distant historical figure who was somehow connected to our freedom. If it's an objective, it's a very sad objective, and I hope that they never succeed, whoever's trying it. I think teamwork, team spirit, that he didn't ever project that I am the be all and end all of this movement. It was so collective that everybody involved, they felt they were stakeholders along with him. And that's good leadership, when you also trust the people who work with you enough to, and you're not egotistical enough or at all, or at least you play it down that it's not about me at all, it's about something much larger than myself. So that holds true whether you're running a company or a country or a movement or a revolution. When that becomes much bigger than an individual who symbolizes it, then a lot of people will respect that person much more than if it was someone who's hogging it all and saying, once I'm gone, this is the end, because that suggests a very short-term vision and a selfish vision, that it's all about me and you guys are investing in me, you're not investing in the movement or the thought or the process. So I think that would be the biggest takeaway, that I being a business person. It's very difficult for anyone, average person, to know themselves, to know himself, to know herself.
But I also learned, you said that it wasn't all about him. It wasn't all about they didn't hog the line. It actually not the word selfless somehow doesn't seem the right word, but not self-centered.
Right.
So, if I have to look at ego-driven leaders versus non-ego-driven leaders, we call them being self-driven, but it doesn't matter what term we use. What do you think would happen if we could generate a world where much of the world would have leaders of that kind?
It's very hard to take those qualities away from leaders, because a world associates those qualities with someone who's leading a team. That person will be preoccupied a lot with his own or her own projection of what we have been brainwashed into believing is great leadership. You have to be assertive. You have to have a vision, and that vision has got to be spelt out, and it's got to be my way or the highway, etc. Most average leaders fall into that category, including some of the great political leaders who eventually fail. But with Gandhiji, it's more like moral and spiritual leadership. Now that doesn't come naturally to 99.9% of humanity.
You
That's
also
why
mentioned-
he's Gandhiji. If I were to, I guess, define myself, it would be a gypsy. And gypsies are always restless, and they thrive in chaos, and they're creative, and they express themselves through their singing, their dance, their and so many different ways. So that is the essential person. But also, I not that I'm in any way putting myself on the same platform as Gandhiji, but I think we do share a common trait, which is um, practicality. And he always found very practical solutions in the midst of crisis. He would go straight to the
number.
yeah, and then just push on and push ahead till he achieved his objective. I think I'm pretty good at finding solutions in the shortest possible way and in the most practical way, which saves everybody around me, and primarily it saves me a lot of time and energy and effort to get to the point. You know, the word that people keep coming up with, which I personally dislike, is humility, because it's often misunderstood. Humility, false humility, real humility, is very hard for very young people to make that distinction. And I think they also need a strong sense of self worth. So if you preach humility to the very young, they won't even understand what it means. So I would refrain from teaching them that word at too young an age, because you have to be mature enough to understand how much power humility gives you. But for a lot of young people, it means you to play your own worth down, or you to play your achievements down. It doesn't mean that at all. It's a philosophy you live by. That you don't have to go to be a braggart and go beating a drum. You don't need to. Every aspect of your life should speak for itself, not just your career, but how you deal with everyday situations with each and every person you interact with. And if you can do that successfully, then you've actually understood what humility means, that you're just one of millions of other people trying to get on with their lives. There's nothing that you're doing that's that special. But young people need to feel special, and we should never deny them that.